Hi everybody, this is Daryl Brooks here. I'm live in Los Angeles, and I'm here with Mr. Tom Mesereau. How you doing, Mr. Mesereau?
Hey, fine, Daryl.
You know,
Thanks for having me.
Yes, I am so excited because I told a lot of my friends and fans on Facebook, and I said I'm going to meet the entertainment lawyer, the criminal defense lawyer, Michael Jackson's lawyer, Bill Cosby's lawyer, Mike Tyson's lawyer, Suge Knight's lawyer. I mean, you've done it all.
I've had my experiences for sure.
Yeah.
The life of a criminal defense lawyer is a turbulent life. It's a challenging life, but I wouldn't have it any other way. It's where I belong.
Oh, wow. And one of my friends, I have a lawyer friend, Fletcher Duddy, and he was so excited, that I was coming to interview. He says, "That's the guy with the nice suits and the white hair?" I said, "Yes, that's him."
No suit today.
No suit today. And he's just fine. And I am excited. We're here live with the On Fire Show. I'm your host, Daryl Brooks. I'd like to thank you all for watching. And I'm here with Mr. Tom Mesereau. So, Mr. Mesereau, we don't want to take up too much of your time, but we want to ask you some questions.
Sure.
How'd you get started? You're from New Jersey, right?
I'm from New York and New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
My father was a West Point graduate.
Mm-hmm.
He was from New Jersey, Bergenfield, New Jersey.
Okay.
I was born at West Point. My parents are in the Army.
Wow.
And we traveled through Army bases. My sister was born in Fort Benning, Georgia, on an Army base.
Mm-hmm.
And then my father left the service, went into the restaurant business in New York City. We lived in Riverdale, New York City, and then moved to Englewood, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And most of my upbringing was in New Jersey.
Oh, okay. So you're kind of were you a military rat?
I was for a while, military brat.
Brat,
you bet.
yeah.
You bet. My sister and I were both born on military bases.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you're born on West Point. At West Point.
Yeah.
Wow.
I
don't know anybody born at West Point.
I'm still an Army football fan.
Mm-hmm.
I follow their football team more than anybody else. And the morning of the Army-Navy game, I'm on pins and needles. That's my favorite game of the year.
Oh, wow. So, some of the questions that were asked to me, how'd you get started in being a lawyer?
Well, my father, as I mentioned before, was a West Point graduate.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't go to law school. He wasn't a lawyer. He left the service and was in the restaurant business, but he brought me up to always consider law school. He always said to me, look, if you don't know what you want to do, consider law school because it opens a lot of doors.
Mm-hmm.
It trains you to do a lot of things. You can switch positions, with a law degree more than any other degree, and he was 100% correct. And I went to college, wasn't sure if I was going to go to law school or business school. I did a master's degree in England in international affairs. I thought of getting involved in foreign affairs, perhaps in the foreign service or as a journalist.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kept thinking about my father's message, go to law school, you'll never regret it. And I went to law school at his suggestion, and I'm very grateful that he recommended it to me because it really worked out fine for me.
So did you go to law school in Los Angeles, or
I went to San Francisco.
San Francisco.
Yeah, University of California, Hastings College of Law.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried different things. I was a civil litigator at a big firm in Washington, D.C. I was a DA in Southern California. I was with a corporation, and everything was interesting for a while. And then I had to really say to myself, where do you belong? Where are you going to have passion? And I said to myself, you don't like elitism. You like the courtroom, you like fighting for freedom,
Mm-hmm.
you like defending underdogs, it's something you've always liked, and maybe you're a compassionate person, maybe criminal defense is where you belong, and it turned out to be the right decision.
Now, I talked to a lot of attorneys, and they said, well, ask them, what was that case that was it for you?
I'm asked a question like that once in a while, and you got to understand that to anyone charged with a crime, that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most important case in the world. When someone's freedom and reputation are on the line, that's the most important thing in their life. So I don't like to value anybody over someone else.
Mm-hmm.
I've represented homeless people that were facing the death penalty.
Wow.
I represented Michael Jackson. I represented Bill Cosby. To everyone charged with a crime, that's the most important case.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't take any case lightly, and I don't value anybody more than anyone else.
So,
I think all should be equal in a court of justice. Unfortunately, a lot of unfairness goes on out there, but everybody is of equal value in a court of law, in my opinion.
So in the beginning, what year was it when you started criminal justice?
Well, I graduated law school in 1979. I was with a big law firm in Washington, D.C. for about a year. And then I switched back to California, and I was a district attorney, God forbid. I didn't fit in at all.
Okay.
Everybody was high-fiving because they put poor kids away that had no chance, and I didn't relate to it. I didn't like it. My first case really just scarred me on prosecution. I was asked to prosecute a young girl in Orange County for petty theft. She confessed to it, she'd been caught, she was on tape. It was a slam dunk, anybody could win. Mm-hmm. And I started reading her file and I realized she was suicidal. She'd been the victim of sexual abuse, physical abuse. She was a drug user. She got to juvenile hall and looked for typewriter fluid to sniff. And I said to myself, I don't want to hurt this person. Mm-hmm. I want to help this person. And I did what I was asked to do. She was convicted. Everybody wanted to high-five me after it, and I was disgusted. And I knew right then and there, prosecution's not for me.
Wow, wow. So, you know, a lot of, like I said, a lot of people see you as that great criminal attorney and for the big entertainers. What was the first case where you have someone, a high-profile case?
Well, I had a number of entertainers in smaller cases at the beginning.
Cases, yeah.
And I wasn't just defending entertainers. With big notoriety, I want to work with their firm, and I said I would. And the case was so bogus, it was just ridiculous. We did some investigation into who this accuser was. Lawyer Allred came right out and gave a press conference supporting the accuser. And we put together a booklet on our investigation that was so powerful as to why this shouldn't be prosecuted that they backed off and did not charge him. So I represented him, but charges were not filed because of the work we did very quickly in the case.
Wow. And, you know, one of the things that when I met you in Philadelphia, you talked about the Michael Jackson case.
That was a big case.
That was a big case.
I have to admit.
You know, when I was watching television, and me and some friends, I recall, like, who's that guy with the nice suit with the white hair? You know, and that's his lawyer. And
I was his lead counsel.
Yeah.
And,
what was that like? What was that like?
More media from around the world covered it than O.J. Simpson and Scott Peterson combined, because Michael was the most famous person in the world. Now, the trial wasn't on television like O.J. Simpson was, so you didn't have ratings like O.J. Simpson in America, but around the world, there was nothing like it. And on verdict day, when they were about to read the verdict, I mean, in capitals all over the world, people just stopped. I know in Times Square, I've seen on TV, I'm in the courtroom, you know, waiting for the verdict with Michael and our team. But I know in Times Square, people just stopped what they were doing and looked up at the big screen to see what was going to happen to Michael Jackson. And, you know, the trial was about 5 months. I lived up there in northern Santa Barbara County, north of Los Angeles County, for 6 months. And it just consumed me. But with all the fanfare and all the publicity and all the craziness that went on around the courthouse, I lived like a hermit. I mean, I went to bed at 7:30 every night. I was up at 3 o'clock every day. That's my typical schedule in a trial. And the media was trying to set me up. I was well aware of that.
How were they trying to set you up?
They were trying to interview former girlfriends. They were interviewing anybody they could to get dirt on me. They were following me around. But I quickly let it be known, you're not going to find me in a bar. You're not going to find me in a restaurant. You're not going to find me in a hotel lobby. You're not going to put someone behind me and try and put me in a compromising position. It's not going to happen. And I lived like a hermit, and that's what I did for really 6 months in that case.
Now, did you have a team around you?
I had a team. We all had our condominiums, all next to one another. We had one duplex that we called the War Room that had about 4,000 binders of documents, about 30 computers. We had staff working around the clock. They had a key to my condo. And while I was sleeping, they'd be opening the door with updated witness books. Typically in a trial, I'd like a three-ring binder or binders for each witness with every document that references the witness in alphabetical order. Whether it's a newspaper article, a police report, an interview, whatever it is, I like everything in alphabetical order. And I do that for a reason. I want to organize my thoughts as to how this witness is going to be approached. I want to see if their statements have changed. I want to see who might have influenced the witness. Some witnesses had 20 binders, some would have one. But we'd update them as we got more information. So all night, staffers would be delivering these things on my stairs going up into the duplex. And in the morning when I woke up at 3, I would just see these binders all there, and I would pick them all up and get my pot of coffee and start going to work for about 3 hours before I went to trial.
Well, so your team was like, I guess, like an NBA team. You're the head coach, and the rest around you
and
are great players.
It was rough because people were always trying to second guess you, stab you in the back. Lawyers were constantly trying to replace me. It was a nonstop effort at juggling a million balls. I remember after the acquittal, Berry Gordy, who founded Motown, as a son, Kerry Gordy, who's a friend of mine. And Kerry called me up and he said, you know, my father has a private lunch at the Peninsula Hotel in Los Angeles the second Tuesday of every month, and it's only for family, but he'd like to invite you. So he said, would you like to come? I said, sure. So I came, and Mr. Gordy, who's, you know, one of the greatest legends in the history of music, was sitting there at the head of the table, and all of his kids were on both sides. And he said to me, how did you handle all that? How did you do it? And I said, I'd like to tell you I'm some genius, and and this is how I did it, but quite honestly, I'm not sure. You know, I just did my best. It was so crazy. There were some nights I just prayed and said, dear God, give me the guidance, give me help. I need it, you know, because it wasn't just the prosecution you were fighting. You were fighting people on your side who were trying to second guess you. You know, celebrities attract people who like to create a need for themselves. And some are more ethical than others. You know, some are honest and really on the side of the celebrity and want to work in their best interests. Others want to keep them off balance, insecure, so they create a need for themselves. And I was dealing with people that were always trying to criticize me, always trying to get Michael and his family suspicious of me so they could feel important.
So how did you deal with that?
The best I could. To me, the most important people were 13 people. 12 jurors and a judge. They were the most important. I didn't let the media distract me. I didn't want cameras in the courtroom. The lawyer I replaced wanted cameras in the courtroom. He appealed the judge's ruling prohibiting them, and I dismissed the appeal. I said, look, we're here to get the job done in court. I don't want witnesses watching on TV what other witnesses are saying. I don't want witnesses seeing what commentators and critics are all saying. I don't want them influenced by a circus-like environment on TV. It's going to be bad enough as it is. The problem, one of the big problems with that case was the worldwide media wanted him convicted. Because Berry Gordy said to me in that luncheon, he said, you know, you cost the worldwide media billions when you acquitted him, because they just wanted the last chapter of the rise and fall of Michael Jackson. They wanted to see him go to the greatest heights and then just splatter. And I was told later on how upset the media were. They wanted to see him convicted, led right to jail. They wanted to see him come out for sentencing with no makeup, no clothes like he was used to wearing, you know, orange outfit. They wanted to see all this. And it was denied them because he was acquitted.
Why is that? Why do you think it is?
Because our society likes to see people rise to the top and then just splatter. And when you rise to the top, you generate envy, jealousy. You know, people resent you. People want you to help them, and if you help them, they resent it, and if you don't help them, they resent it. And dealing with fame is a very difficult situation. I mean, consider the 3 highest grossing dead at 50. Number 2, Elvis Presley dead at 42. Number 3, Marilyn Monroe dead at 36.
Wow.
Fame can kill you. Everybody wants to give you drugs, and doctors want to give you medications, and everybody's going to do you a favor. And it's a very tricky business, particularly if you get famous at a young age. Very hard thing to deal with.
So, you know, a lot of people wanted to know, they told me to ask you this, how was it just having a conversation with Michael, sitting down with Michael Jackson? What was it like?
If Michael were sitting right here with us, he'd be very shy. He'd be very quiet. He would look at us intensely to study us, but he would be humble, meek, and very shy. Put him on stage, there's nobody better.
It's the greatest entertainment.
I mean, the man never took a dance lesson, which a lot of people don't realize. The late Fred Astaire said Michael Jackson is the greatest dancer that ever lived. Never took a lesson. In fact, a lot of people don't know this, but on the set of The Wiz, you know, when Michael, as a teenager, they were doing the Wizard of Oz, the black version of the Wizard of Oz, they called The Wiz. He was trying to be friendly to everybody, and people were being cold to him, and he didn't understand it. And finally, one of the directors pulled him aside and said, Michael, I know you're wondering why are people giving you the cold shoulder. Here's the problem, Michael. They're working, they're rehearsing back and forth, sweating day in, day out to get these moves down. All you do is look at it, and you do it, and it's done perfectly. He just was a genius at what he did.
I remember watching the Thriller documentary, and they said all these dancers were practicing for years, and he just looked at it and figured it out.
Knew it right away.
So, one of the things, that, also people have told me to ask you, a lot of fans, about the Bill Cosby case. And you can tell us a little bit how you got started with the Bill Cosby case.
Well, I was approached, would I be interested in the case? And of course, I've always been a Bill Cosby fan. I thought he was a great genius, a great talent in so many different areas.
Yes.
And not only a talent, but a humane, giving person who donated between $100 and $200 million to social causes. He sent people to college. He sent people to graduate school. He rescued colleges that were going under. Did so many wonderful things, along with being an amazing talent as a comedian, as an actor, as a writer, you name it. Read his books, fantastic books. Controversial, sure, he was willing to express his views and be honest about it. But nevertheless, I always was a great fan of Bill Cosby, and I just had trouble believing he could be guilty of the things he was charged of. And to this day, I absolutely do not believe he's guilty of any of these charged crimes. And I have to say, it was a very, very unpleasant experience, that trial. It was the most unfair trial I've ever been part of. And I've been trying for 20 years death cases in Alabama. I handled a capital case in Mississippi. I've handled cases around the country. This was the most unfair trial from day one. I still can't believe this kind of stuff was allowed to go forward. I mean, originally the DA made an agreement with Mr. Cosby not to prosecute him, told his lawyers he has no Fifth Amendment privilege not to testify because I'm not going to come after him. I agree not to do this. And that DA has testified under oath that I agreed not to prosecute him. When that DA ran for district attorney, it was a very bitter contest with another opponent who turned out to be the judge in our case. So all of a sudden, the defense makes a motion to throw this case out because the DA at the time made an agreement not to prosecute. That DA testifies under oath, that's correct, I agreed not to prosecute him. And his old bitter political opponent, who's now the judge, says, I don't find him credible.
Wow.
So that's how everything begins. Utterly ridiculous. This is not supposed to be a political football, whether you go after someone, but the current DA ran for office on the platform, advertised on TV, I will go after Bill Cosby if elected. Well, what kind of a situation is that? You don't politicize justice the way this was politicized. But then it got even worse. I mean, we had one juror, an African-American lady, was removed and then contacted the defense the next day and said one of the white male jurors made a comment that he's guilty and the trial hasn't even started. In fact, what she said, the man had said, were words to the effect, he's guilty and this won't be a long deliberation. So we asked to have that juror removed. He denied that he had made those statements, and the judge refused.
Wow.
Then, in the first trial, which ended up in a hung jury, the judge allowed one other witness to come in to say he had done something similar to me. In our trial, he upped it to 5. Wouldn't give any reasons for it. One of those women screamed out he was a serial rapist. Judge wouldn't grant a mistrial. Another woman screamed out words to the effect, you know what you did to me, Mr. Cosby. Judge wouldn't give a mistrial. We proved the case wasn't filed on time. There's a statute of limitations which says basically if a case is not filed in a certain amount of time, it's gone. You can't file it. They claimed the events happened on a certain date. We proved they couldn't possibly have happened because she made the alleged victim said she had called Cosby. We showed she couldn't call Cosby because her phone had no calls, his phone didn't have the calls, and we proved he wasn't even in town. We had his travel records, his phone records, his itinerary. Judge would not even rule on the motion. Wouldn't have a hearing on it, wouldn't rule on it. There were so many other things that were excluded from the trial that were done, in my opinion, to make sure there was a conviction. I think the judge was basically wanted a conviction. We tried to remove him because his wife was a highly respected counselor of sexual assault victims, highly published, highly renowned. We had a hearing and we showed that she had raised some money for a group that opposed us. Judge said he wasn't biased. So you've got a judge who already ruled that the prior DA is not credible, his old opponent who beat him. The same judge is married to a woman who's a highly respected sexual assault counselor in the Philadelphia area. He won't remove himself. Says he's not biased.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many other things I can tell you about the trial.
Yeah, you know,
that
when
are just not right.
I have some friends that I go to, like a couple cigar lounges in Philadelphia, and they're lawyers, and they were saying that the whole trial was a scam, and they said also that they talked about the prosecutor and the judge. They know these prosecutors, they know the judge, and they said it was a scam.
It was a travesty of justice. I've never been in such an unfair trial in my life, and you know, the thing should never even have started. Because the prior DA made an agreement not to prosecute him, told Mr. Cosby, you can rely on my agreement, testified to that effect under oath, plus we proved it wasn't filed on time. And the judge wouldn't even have a hearing on the issue. He said he wanted the jury to decide. And there were so many shenanigans throughout that trial that, in my opinion, it's got to be the most unfair trial I've ever been in. Oh, wow. I have to tell you.
Now, getting back to being a lawyer, and some of the things that I'm sure some other lawyers, friends of mine, will be watching, especially from New Jersey area, who I know. What does it take to be Tom Mesereau?
Well, I said to myself a long time ago, why are some trial lawyers better than others? We all go to law school. Most of us study trial practice. We read the texts. We do mock trials. We're taught by judges, we're taught by lawyers what to do. So why are some better than others? And it occurred to me that many trial lawyers simply do what they're taught. They are afraid to break the rules. They're afraid to take chances. And I've always said that if you do what you're taught, you'll never embarrass yourself. But you're also not going to win a lot of cases you could win if you took a few chances. Now, if you're a risk taker, you're going to get burned sometimes. For example, in cross-examination, you know, we're taught, don't ask the why question, don't ask the how question, don't ask a question you don't know the answer to. And I learned very early in life that was ridiculous. You can't really get to people on cross if you follow those rules strictly all the time. But even more than that, all these, I kept seeing people talk about and hearing people talk about these concepts of what a trial lawyer is. Tough, rough trial lawyer. And I realized that compassion, kindness, humanity, decency, I think gets you a lot farther than being a rough, tough lawyer. You know what I mean? I've seen lawyers attack everybody in courtrooms and their clients think they're being protected. And they're just selling their client right down the drain. They're putting on a show. And I really came to the conclusion that to really be good, as good as you can be, you need to know who you are and be comfortable with who you are. That's not an easy thing to do. A lot of us grow up confused, aren't sure where we belong, where we fit in, where we ought to be. I'm an example of that. But I think we owe it to ourselves to just find out who we are as human beings, what makes us tick. And I'll tell you, some lawyers who are very theatrical, very dramatic, are very ineffective, because nobody really sees legitimacy in what they're doing. Nobody sees them as authentic people. And other lawyers are not terribly dramatic, not terribly exciting, maybe even kind of boring, but they're real people. And you feel that they're really behind their clients. And I think bringing humanity into the courtroom, not just the lawyer being a decent human being, but see, the prosecutors are taught to dehumanize the person accused. They never call them by their name. They call them the defendant, the defendant, the defendant. The defense attorney has to get to know their client, has to really see value in their client, and walk into the courtroom as someone who is going to humanize someone who's already been dehumanized the moment you walk in. When people walk in a courtroom, jurors, witnesses, the public, I don't care who it is, you don't have a comfortable feeling. You know, this is not a happy place. It intentionally is a little scary, kind of dry, kind of threatening. You don't see kids playing. You don't see wonderful, beautiful flowers everywhere. I mean, this is a rough kind of scene. So the moment you walk in, people think something's wrong here. You know, why are we spending resources on this? Did that defendant must have been done something. You know, the people that protect us, are they really wrong here? And so even though there's a presumption of innocence, that's just a concept. That's just a theory. We have to go in there assuming people think the client's guilty, assuming people have already dehumanized the client consciously or unconsciously, and we have to find a way to bring humanity to show who this human being is. And if the defense lawyers don't care, either because they don't care or they're too busy, that's going to be thrown on the wayside.
And I get a sense by talking to you that there's a fire inside you. It's burning as a fire.
Well,
that's
I
been burning.
like people, and I don't like seeing people devalued or dehumanized. I just don't like it. I cut my teeth years ago trying lots of gang cases in Los Angeles. L.A. is where the Crips and the Bloods were founded. This city used to be a bloodbath of gang violence. It still is a real problem because gangs are multi-generational now. Grandparents, uncles, cousins, families have been in gangs for generations, and there were scores to settle, and there were just problems with this whole thing. So I realized that they were just grabbing these young men of color were just being swept up in the streets of Los Angeles and just locked away easily. The trials weren't fair. They were bringing in their gang tattoos, their monikers. Jurists from other parts of town that know nothing about the inner city were asked to judge them, and they were scared to death already because it was a gang case. And I had no doubt that defense lawyers were not bringing humanity into the courtroom. Their clients were cooked as soon as they walked in, and the jury heard it was a gang case in Los Angeles. Because the drive-bys were so numerous, the bloodbath was so continual. And I said to myself, if you're going to defend these cases, you need to find out who your client is. You need to know this human being and realize this person has value. Get to know their family. How did they grow up? What were their influences? You know, what mistakes did they make? What good things have they done? And try and show that this human being has value, even though they're either in a gang or have had to deal with gangs. And I had to find a way to just let people, particularly scared jurors, know this is not a criminal. This is a kid who walks out the door and has to deal with gang members just to get to school. You know, this person is not what this prosecutor, this elitist white guy from an Ivy League school is trying to tell you he is, because he knows nothing about this place. And I discovered that humanizing your client as best you can, because you care, because you put in the effort, can make a big difference in a criminal case.
Wow, that's interesting, and that's great. Now, one of the questions people all want me to ask you is that what has to change in the criminal justice system to make it better from the court's perspective?
Well, first of all, our system is always in a state of flux. Our courts are always issuing new rulings, trying to make the system better. First of all, you have to understand this. The system can never work perfectly. Why not? Because it's not reality. It's a recreation of reality.
Okay.
When a trial is reconstructing something that happened outside, may have happened years ago, may have happened a few months ago, it's reconstructing it within a framework of certain rules. And that, by definition, is problematic, because you're not there seeing what happened. Everybody's trying to give you another story about what happened within certain rules, rules of ethics, rules of procedure, substantive rules of law. And so that system can never be perfect to begin with. And the other problem is that human beings, in my opinion, unless they really look into themselves and try and do something about this, human beings usually devalue somebody somewhere, somehow. They want to think they're better than somebody. It happens within ethnic groups, it happens between ethnic groups, it happens within religious groups, it happens between religious groups, it happens within nations, it happens between nations. And it's so easy on a subconscious level to devalue somebody that you don't know, that's charged with a crime, that's being demonized by the prosecution. And the system can never be perfect. We've had 300 plus people released from prison with DNA, people who were facing the death penalty, people who were facing life in prison, their families destroyed by their conviction. Now, these are cases where there's DNA and it was tested. How many people have gone to prison with eyewitness identifications that were problematic, that were faulty? I mean, and we'll never know how many people were falsely accused, falsely convicted, and destroyed, and their families destroyed because of an imperfect system. So let me be clear. This is the best criminal justice system I know of in the world. I think we have the best one. I think it's far from perfect. I think it will always create injustice because human beings are not perfect, and we always have to work to try and figure out where are we devaluing people, dehumanizing people, even if it's unintended, okay? How are we mistreating people and not even giving them the chance they deserve? We say it's a presumption of innocence, but practically, you know that when jurors walk into a courtroom, they think someone's guilty.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if I've answered your question.
Oh yeah,
well,
definitely.
but
Yes,
I've tried to.
Because when I talk to other lawyers, they say, well, you know, this is the perfect system. I mean, it's not the perfect system, but this is the best system in the country.
It's the best system in the world, I believe,
yeah.
but it's still far from perfect. If it were perfect, we wouldn't see laws change all the time, because we're always trying to make it better. And the justice system is supposed to reflect society in many ways, and society is always changing. But the fundamental problem is that human beings look down on other people. And they sometimes do it when they don't realize. I said a long time ago in an article I published, I said, people who say, you know, I was raised to be racist, I was raised to be prejudiced. To me, they're the ones I trust more than people who say, oh, I don't have a prejudicial bone. I'm to be very, very careful throughout our lives.
Now, you talked about pro bono and how you help the inner city cases, and people in the city, people who don't have, you know, the finances to pay for a lawyer like you. What is it like when you go to one of certain areas, individuals that basically don't
To it. You know, I represented a woman, things Mr. Mesereau hasn't done, and I said, shut your mouth, you're hurting yourself. And she was acquitted.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll never forget, about a year went by and my phone rang, and this deep voice said to me, do you know who this is? I said, yeah, I know who it is. I said, you're the one who, I won't say what I said, you're the one who busted my, because she was just making it so difficult, she didn't trust me. I had a gang member, an 8-tray gangster crip, charged with murder. I was against a prosecutor who'd won 72 murder cases straight, never lost one. And he was suspicious. You hear from the DA, the DA send you?
Yeah.
Why are you helping me out? Nobody helps me out.
Yeah, wow.
You know, I acquitted him. And but he was just always wondering, why is this guy helping me? Why is he being nice to me? Some people aren't used to that.
Yeah.
You know, some of our young men in gang neighborhoods haven't had, you know, the associations that make them comfortable with a white lawyer with long hair shows up and says, I'm going to help you out in this case. And their attitude is like, who the hell are you? You know, why are you doing this? You know? So I've had mixed reactions. I've also had other people that were very grateful that I would help them out. But I spent years volunteering at free legal clinics in South Los Angeles, run mostly by churches. And I discovered that the lawyers who did that, usually it was Saturdays or Sundays, at least 2 a month, sometimes every week, they really felt good about themselves. You know, they were people. One thing about the legal profession, since I was in law school, all the studies have shown that the majority of lawyers are not happy with what they're doing. And I always tell them, you want to bring some happiness into your field? Donate some time, help some poor people. Do it just for the joy of helping someone who doesn't have resources or the gifts or the license that you have. And most of them will come back at some point and say, you know, you're absolutely correct. I love doing this, you know?
That's awesome. And you're the man.
Well, thank you.
You know, you're definitely the man. Now, I'm looking at this attorney at law, and wow, front page. What was this like?
I was honored, you know. They made me Attorney of the Month. This is a magazine that's national. Oh, wow. And this was in 2016, I think. 2015 or 16? 15. Okay.
Can I get a copy, or
sure?
You gotta sign it. You gotta sign this for me.
I'll be happy to.
Now, this I want you to take a look at some of your photos.
Okay.
And some of the things that you're proud of. You were talking about your pictures, and you got Muhammad Ali. How you met Muhammad Ali?
I met the first. As I said before, I grew up in New York City and Englewood, New Jersey. And my grandfather and my father were boxing fans. And the first professional fight I ever attended was in Madison Square Garden. It was Cassius versus Doug Jones. And I'm watching a young he hadn't changed his name to Muhammad Ali yet, but watching a young Cassius Clay dazzle everybody, just it affected me for the rest of my life. He's one of my heroes. I mean, just a man of amazing skill, courage, dynamism. He took risks. He was an athlete who wasn't afraid to take risks, and it cost him, and he's one of my heroes. This is Earl Rogers.
Earl Rogers, yes.
100 years ago was the most famous criminal defense attorney in Los Angeles. Legendary lawyer, trial lawyer. I've studied him backwards and forwards. Just a fantastic and interesting lawyer. He defended the late Clarence Darrow when Clarence Darrow was charged with a crime, and Clarence Darrow is one of the greatest. That's Clarence Darrow right there.
This is Clarence Darrow?
Right there, yes.
Wow.
One of my heroes as well.
What was he like?
Well, I never knew him, but I mean, every year I read a book either by or about him. I keep reading them because every time I read about him or something by him, I learn something new. A man of enormous intellect and enormous compassion, a great humanitarian, and he did things in the courtroom that nobody else had the guts to do, and he's somebody I've studied very carefully.
Yeah, I see you have Johnny Cochran.
Johnny Cochran, the best trial lawyer I ever saw. Absolutely, bar none. A man of enormous intellect, compassion, sensitivity, skill, a real fighter for justice, and I have a soft spot for him because he recommended me to the Jacksons.
Wow!
And I'll never forget him for doing that, and he was a wonderful man.
Now you're up here with
that's Jay Leno.
Jay Leno. What was it like being on the Jay Leno show?
It was fun.
Yeah.
You know, I set some rules before I did it. This was after the Jackson acquittals.
Okay.
And he'd been rough on Michael during the trial. And I said, don't make any jokes about Michael in front of me. You know, if you're going to do that, I'm going to walk off. You know, so he was a man of his word. We had a nice interview, very friendly, and this was a very exciting time for me because I had won this big trial, and networks were all asking me to be on TV, and it was a very exciting time.
Wow. So, is there one lawyer? I mean, you have Daryl here and Earl Rogers.
Well, I've got Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln. Oh, wow.
A lot of people don't realize
he was a lawyer.
Abraham Lincoln was one of the best criminal defense lawyers of his time.
Wow.
And he defended many very, very difficult murder cases, had a tremendous acquittal rate. You see Lincoln there, you see the slave behind him in shackles. A great humanitarian, obviously, one of my heroes as well.
So is there one attorney that, which one attorney is your hero? Is there, I mean, you have plenty, but there's one you admire the most, one that made you want to become a lawyer?
Johnny Cochran.
Johnny Cochran?
Johnny Cochran was the best.
Yeah.
You know, if anyone doesn't believe me, just watch the O.J. Simpson trial very closely, especially his closing argument.
Yeah.
You know, watch Johnny Cochran's closing argument, and you'll be so dazzled by what this man could do. I remember in the middle of that closing argument, there was a pause in the trial, and the networks went back to New York. It was Court TV that was covering it. And there was a panel of lawyers and DAs and professors. And the general consensus was, you know, we usually teach our students, don't give a long closing argument. Don't bore the jury, you know, that they're ready to go in and deliberate. But they saw him for days, and they said, we have to rethink everything we've been teaching. This is so remarkable what we're watching, the way this man keeps your attention for days. He was just an amazing lawyer. If the glove does not fit, he must have quit. Well, look, he knew what to do, right?
Yeah.
He knew what to do.
So, one of the questions I'd like to ask you is, what's next for you?
Well, I've always got cases that I'm defending. I do a lot of white-collar defense. I do a lot of healthcare fraud, mortgage fraud. I've done securities fraud. And right now, I have a number of white-collar cases that are set for trial. And that's where I'm at right now. I do a free murder case in Alabama every year.
Oh.
I had one set for 2 weeks ago, and it was continued till next May. But I've been doing free murder cases in Alabama for 20 years.
Wow.
And I've done a number of capital cases, and it's something I really believe in and intend to do.
All right.
The rest of my career.
Well, Fire Show with your host, Daryl M. Brooks. I'm here with Mr. Tom Mesereau, great lawyer, probably one of the greatest lawyers in the history of America.
Thank you.
Yes. No, it's when I talk to lawyers, especially one of my good friends, Fletcher Duddy, You know, he's make sure, you know, I interview you, ask the questions, and he's going to watch this and send it out to his friends.
Oh, thank you
And
very
a
much.
lot of other lawyers in New Jersey who I know wanted to say, okay, you got to interview this guy. And when you called me, your message went right to my voicemail.
Okay.
So I didn't realize that you called, and I was on my way here. I was like, who's this, Mr. Mesereau? So then I just had to call you.
Well, thank you for coming, and thank you for having me. I really
thank you.
enjoyed it. It's a real privilege to be on this show. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Daryl.
All right, this is going for our show, and can I get your signature?
You bet.
Yes.
Okay.
You got a number of awards here, too.